CEO denied a single dad's promotion for 5 years. His rival company hired him as VP. They laughed when Marcus Webb walked into the Pinnacle Group's annual leadership summit. Sandra Hollis, Chief of Strategy, leaned over to her deputy, Derek Crane, and said, loud enough for the room to catch, "That's the single dad from Ops." HR must have made a clerical error. Derek smirked. 3 senior directors adjusted their lanyards and looked away, pretending not to hear. The Pinnacle ballroom gleamed under track lighting and the quiet arrogance of people who had never once doubted whether they belonged in a room. Marcus Webb stood at the entrance in a blazer he'd worn to his daughter's 4th-grade science fair 2 years ago, holding a name badge still in its plastic sleeve, while Sandra Hollis held court at the VIP table in the kind of blazer that has its own name. She pointed. Derek nodded. 2 directors beside them exchanged glances that said everything without saying anything. "Operations manager," Sandra said to the table, with the tone of someone naming a stray dog. "Here for the empowerment panel." Cute. What Sandra didn't know, what none of them in that room knew, was that Marcus Webb had spent the past 3 months quietly interviewing with Meridian Dynamics, Pinnacle Group's largest competitor. What they especially didn't know was that by the end of the week, Meridian would announce their new VP of Operations, and that announcement would land like a grenade in the middle of Sandra Hollis's quarterly strategy meeting. But for now, Marcus just clipped his badge to his lapel and found a seat near the back. He'd been in back rows before. He knew how to wait. 14 hours earlier, Marcus had woken at 5:15 a.m. to the sound of his daughter Chloe talking to her stuffed rabbit. He lay still for a moment, listening. She was explaining to the rabbit, whose name was Theodore, a name she'd chosen herself at age 3 and defended fiercely ever since, that today was an important day, and that Theodore needed to be on his best behavior. "Daddy has a big meeting," she whispered. "We have to be quiet until he's ready." Marcus got up before she finished the sentence. He moved through their apartment the way he always did, deliberately, quietly, checking the door twice, because the lock stuck and he'd never gotten around to fixing it. The kitchen light flickered. He made a mental note. He'd made that note 17 times. The landlord had heard it twice. The rest of the times, Marcus had decided it wasn't worth the fight, that there were bigger things to conserve energy for. He made Chloe's lunch. Turkey and cheddar on wheat, cut diagonal. She only ate triangles. Had strong opinions about this, a handful of grapes, and a folded note on a post-it that said, "You are braver than you think. Love. Dad." He wrote one every day. She kept them in a shoebox under her bed. He'd found the box once by accident, hadn't moved it, hadn't said anything. Just quietly replaced the lid. The coffee maker dripped. Outside, it was still dark. He'd been at Pinnacle Group for 9 years. 9 years of 5:15 wake-ups, of covering shifts when someone called out, of building the operations division from a cost center into the company's 3rd largest revenue driver. He had the metrics. He'd submitted them 3 times, attached to 3 separate promotion applications over 5 years. Each time, the response from Sandra Hollis's office had been some variation of the same message. Not the right time. We'll revisit. The last time, 8 months ago, Sandra had told him directly, "You're a strong performer, Marcus, but a VP role requires full availability, and given your situation at home," she'd trailed off. He'd finished the sentence himself, silently, the way you learn to do when people say the quiet part at a volume just below accountability. His situation at home. His daughter. His life. He'd driven home that day and sat in the parking garage for 22 minutes before going up to relieve the babysitter. He hadn't told anyone at work about the Meridian interviews. Not his assistant. Not his closest colleague, Deb from finance. Not even Chloe. Because Chloe was 7 and would absolutely tell her teacher, who would tell the room parent, who would tell someone. He knew how information moved. He dressed carefully that morning. The blazer that still fit. Chloe emerged from her room in mismatched socks and a serious expression. "You look handsome, Daddy. You look like you dressed in the dark." She looked down. I did. Theodore was sleeping, and I didn't want to wake him. He knelt and fixed her socks. She patted his shoulder like he was the one who needed reassurance. "You're going to do great," she said. He drove her to school first. The leadership summit had begun by the time Marcus arrived, running 6 minutes behind because the school drop-off lane had stalled, and he'd refused to be the parent who drove on the shoulder. He found his seat. Around him, VP-level attendees networked with the casual fluency of people who had never eaten lunch at their desks, because there was no one to eat dinner with at home. Sandra Hollis opened the morning session. She was good at this: the sweeping welcome, the vision language, the pauses that implied depth. Marcus had admired it once, years ago, before he understood that the vision never quite trickled down to the people in the back rows. Pinnacle's strength, Sandra said, is in its leadership pipeline. We promote from within. We invest in people who invest in this company. Marcus wrote nothing down. Afterward, the room broke into networking clusters. Marcus refilled his coffee. He was standing near the window, watching the city below, when a man appeared beside him, late 50s, silver-templed, the easy posture of someone who'd stopped needing to prove things a long time ago. "Marcus Webb," the man said. Not a question. Marcus turned. "Yes, James Rourke. I've been reading your ops reports. The restructuring you did in Q3, quarterly fulfillment backlog cut by 38%. That was yours?" "My team," Marcus said. "I had good people." James Rourke nodded slowly. "You've been here 9 years. Yes, and you're still in operations management." A pause. Marcus met his eyes. Yes, James Rourke held his gaze for a moment, then handed over a card. Simple, clean, Meridian Dynamics. James Rourke, Chief Executive Officer. "I'd like to continue this conversation," Rourke said, "if you're open to it." Marcus looked at the card, then at James Rourke. Then back at the room, where Sandra Hollis was laughing at something Derek Crane had said, her hand resting on his arm. "I'm open to it," Marcus said. What Marcus didn't know was that James Rourke had been watching Pinnacle's operations metrics for 2 years and had specifically identified Marcus Webb as the architect behind numbers Pinnacle's own leadership hadn't bothered to attribute to anyone. He'd done his homework. He always did. They'd find that out about each other soon enough. The afternoon panel on leadership readiness was moderated by Sandra Hollis. Marcus had been seated in the 3rd row at Derek Crane's suggestion, a gesture Sandra described as making sure all levels feel included. The phrasing hung in the air like a small, precise insult. Sandra opened with a question about what distinguished managers from leaders. The discussion was energetic, self-congratulatory, largely conducted by people who had arrived at their VP titles without ever managing a team through a supply chain collapse at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday. When Sandra turned to the group and asked if anyone wanted to share a real-world operations challenge they'd navigated, Marcus said nothing. He'd learned when to speak and when to let rooms hear themselves. But then Derek Crane said, "I think the challenge a lot of people face is, competing priorities, like when personal obligations start competing with professional ones." He glanced toward Marcus with the bored precision of a man who had never once worried about daycare pickup. The table went quiet. Sandra Hollis smiled. Absolutely. Leadership requires a kind of wholeness, a presence. You can't lead a team from halfway. She didn't look at Marcus. She didn't have to. Marcus set down his pen. I'd push back on that, actually. The room turned. The most present leaders I've seen, he said, evenly, were the ones who understood what was actually at stake. Personal responsibility. Real personal responsibility, not the kind you perform in a meeting, translates directly into professional judgment. The people I've seen lead worst were the ones who had nothing outside this building worth protecting. Silence. Sandra's smile stayed in place, but something behind it rearranged. That's an interesting perspective, she said. It's a documented one, Marcus said. Gallup's 2023 engagement data. Want me to forward the study? Derek Crane cleared his throat. Sandra moved on. But 3 people at that table pulled out their phones. The cocktail hour afterward was where networks actually formed and decisions actually made. The real meeting inside the meeting. Marcus found himself near the bar, nursing a sparkling water, when Sandra Hollis materialized at his elbow. Marcus. Her voice was warm, with the specific warmth of someone controlling a conversation. I hope the day was valuable. It was. I wanted to circle back on the promotion discussion from last fall. She turned slightly, angling away from the nearest cluster of people. We're doing a leadership review in January. I think there might be a path forward for you. A senior manager role, with expanded scope. Senior manager, Marcus repeated. It's a meaningful step. Good visibility. And the bandwidth requirements are more compatible with everything on your plate. He looked at her. She met his eyes with the expression of someone offering a very generous discount. I appreciate the thought, Marcus said. But I've accepted another offer. Sandra Hollis blinked. One clean blink. I'm sorry? Meridian Dynamics, VP of Operations. I start in 3 weeks. The cocktail glass in Sandra's hand didn't move, didn't spill, just stopped, suspended in a moment that stretched 4 seconds longer than comfortable. Meridian, she said. Yes, she recovered quickly, because she was very good at this. That's a real opportunity. Congratulations, thank you. She walked away without touching her drink. Marcus watched her go. He didn't feel triumph. He'd expected to. Had spent months rehearsing the version of this where he felt something clean and satisfying. What he actually felt was tired. 9 years of back rows and compatible bandwidth, and not the right time. 9 years of being managed by people who decided, without reading the data, what he was worth. He was done being managed. His phone buzzed. Chloe's babysitter. She's asking when you're coming home. I told her you had an important meeting. She says to tell you that Theodore says hi. Marcus smiled at his phone. No one in the room saw it. He had about 15 minutes before he needed to leave for pickup. That was fine. He'd worked in 15-minute windows for 9 years. He'd built entire quarters and margins that other people called constraints. He knew what to do with 15 minutes. 3 days later, Meridian Dynamics issued a press release. It went out at 8 a.m. on a Thursday, which meant it arrived in inboxes while Pinnacle Group's executive team was in their weekly leadership briefing. James Rourke had timed it deliberately. He was thoughtful about these things. The release announced Meridian's new VP of Operations, Marcus Webb, formerly of Pinnacle Group, one of the most consequential operations minds in the sector, as Rourke's quote read. It highlighted the Q3 restructuring. It listed Specifically, the 38% backlog reduction and the $2.1 million in recovered fulfillment costs, numbers that Pinnacle's own annual report had attributed to operational improvements without naming anyone. Derek Crane's assistant forwarded it to him without comment. He read it twice. Sandra Hollis's phone began ringing at 8:14. Her largest client, Barton Logistics, called to ask whether the Webb departure would affect their ongoing service contract, the one Marcus had personally negotiated and maintained for 3 years. By 10 a.m., 2 more clients had made similar inquiries. The pattern was clear to anyone paying attention. The clients weren't calling about Pinnacle. They were calling about Marcus. By Friday afternoon, Derek Crane had been quietly removed from the January Leadership Review Committee. No announcement. No reason given. He knew why. Sandra Hollis didn't lose her job. People like Sandra rarely do, immediately. But by the following quarter, when Barton Logistics moved a significant portion of their contract to Meridian Dynamics to maintain continuity with their ops team, their representative explained politely on the call. The impact was auditable. The board noticed. Conversations began that Sandra wasn't invited to. Some consequences arrive like weather. Slow at first, then all at once. Marcus spent his first week at Meridian learning the building the way he learned everything. Methodically, completely, by talking to the people who actually did the work. He met every member of his new team. He learned their names on day 1. On day 2, he asked them what wasn't working. On day 3, he started fixing things. James Rourke stopped by his office on Friday afternoon. "How's the team?" Capable, under-resourced. And honestly relieved someone asked them that question. Rourke smiled. "How are you?" Marcus considered this. "Tired, but the good kind." "The good kind?" "Tired because I did something. Not tired because I waited for permission." Rourke nodded, stood there a moment. "For what it's worth, I've been in this industry 30 years. I've never seen someone build what you built inside a company that didn't know what it had. That takes a particular kind of patience." "I had reasons to be patient," Marcus said. "The daughter, Chloe, yeah, how old?" 7. "She has opinions about sock matching." Rourke laughed, a real one, the kind you can't manufacture. "Bring her by someday. We do a Bring Your Kid to Work Day in March. She'd probably reorganize your supply chain," Marcus said. "She's got strong feelings about inefficiency." He drove home that evening to a girl who had made a Congratulations Daddy VP sign out of 3 pieces of construction paper and significant quantities of glitter. It was taped to the front door. Theodore the rabbit was positioned prominently in the window, wearing a paper bow tie that Chloe had fashioned from a napkin. Marcus stood in the hallway for a moment, looking at the sign. Then he went in and hugged his daughter for longer than 7-year-olds usually tolerate. "Theodore says you earned it," she informed him. "Tell Theodore thank you. He says you're welcome. Also, he says you owe him a new bow tie because I used the good napkin." Marcus laughed. Chloe climbed onto the couch and began a detailed debrief of everything that had happened at school that week, including a complicated dispute about classroom seating arrangements that had apparently resolved itself in a way she found deeply satisfying. He made dinner. She set the table, 4 places, 1 for Theodore, which she explained was for morale. He didn't argue. Later, after she was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the folder of onboarding materials he hadn't had time to finish. The apartment was quiet. The lock on the door still stuck a little. He'd put in a maintenance request at the new place he was moving into next month. Bigger, closer to Chloe's school. With a 2nd bedroom, she'd been promised she could paint any color she wanted. She'd chosen purple. Naturally, he opened the folder and started reading. He had work to do. He always had work to do. The difference now was that the work was worth doing for people who understood what he was worth. That made all the difference.